Hello and good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to episode 28 of Album Rant. And tonight, I would love to dive right back into the world of Iron Maiden, British heavy metal artists, and they have been beyond influential ever since their inception back in the early 80s. Now, I did talk about Iron Maiden on a previous episode. It was episode 6. I think it was episode 6. Yes, it was episode 6. And I talked about an album that came after this one, but tonight we are going to talk about their second studio release, released in the year 1981, entitled Killers. But to kind of sort of give you a recap of how we got here, these guys put out their debut album the year before, and they consisted of Paul Di'Anno on lead vocals, Dave Murray on lead guitar, Dennis Stratton on lead guitar, Steve Harris, the one and only, on the bass guitar, and Clive Burr on the drums. And that was one phenomenal debut. It had hits such as Prowler, Remember Tomorrow, I'm Running Free, yeah, Phantom of the Opera, Transylvania, Strange World, Charlotte the Harlot, and the Iron Maiden. And depending on what release you get, I don't think the vinyl releases include this one, but a lot of the CD releases do. They include Sanctuary! And it was such a great debut. Now, they were a lot different back then than what they are currently today. Currently today, they are a progressive metal band that dives very deeply into themes such as war, religion, and literature. And they only vaguely hinted at those themes back then, but they were really more of a punk metal band, if that makes any sense. But after that debut, they decided to follow it up the following year with the subject of tonight's review, Killers. And unfortunately, Dennis Stratton would leave the band or was fired. I don't really know. If you know, please enlighten me in the comments section. But all I know is he was not on this album. He was replaced by Adrian Smith, who would go on to be a very prominent member of the band and a very prominent songwriter. He was with them all throughout the 80s, and he did take a break from the band in the 90s. There were 4 albums he was not on, but just recently he has rejoined along with lead singer Bruce Dickinson, and they have had a very consistent lineup ever since the year 1999. They have held the same lineup for 24 years, which is very impressive. But currently, the lineup is Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals, Dave Murray on lead guitar, Adrian Smith on lead guitar, Yannick Gers on lead guitar. Yes, they have 3 lead guitarists. Steve Harris on bass guitar, and Nico McBrain on the drums. It is not McBrien, it's McBrain. But that is the current lineup, and it has held for a very long time. But back then, in the year 1981, when they released the Killers album, this was their second official lineup, and it consisted of Paul Di'Anno still on lead vocals, Dave Murray on lead guitar, Adrian Smith on lead guitar. Yes, they only had 2 lead guitarists back then. Steve Harris on bass guitar, and Clive Burr on the drums. So let's see what we have here on the back. Let me zoom in just a little bit right here. There's the lineup. We have Clive Burr, we have Dave Murray, we have Paul Di'Anno, Steve Harris, and Adrian Smith. So that is the lineup of the album that I'm going to be talking about tonight. Now, looking over here on the front, we have the band's mascot. That would be Eddie. And I gotta be honest, Iron Maiden totally owns album covers. They have the best album covers ever. Are they the best metal band out there? Well, they're certainly up there. I'm not sure if I would call them the best, but they are definitely up there. But when it comes to album covers, they totally own it. I mean, every single album cover, they have Eddie in some kind of different pose or some kind of different scenario that kind of ties in with the album's themes, and it's really pretty incredible. But despite all that, unfortunately, I did not get a track list on the back, so I'm going to have to open this thing up and see what we have here. So, yeah, we're definitely going to have to flip this thing around a bit. And then we're going to have to zoom in. Hopefully I can see this. Nope, I'm going to have to take this out. Pardon me for a second. Yes, here is the vinyl. And it kicks off with the Ides of March, which is an instrumental, and it only runs 1 minute and 46 seconds. This may very well be the shortest Iron Maiden song out there. If I'm wrong, again, please correct me in the comments section. I am not saying that with absolute certainty, but I'm fairly certain. But, interesting history about the Ides of March. This was actually written much, much earlier in the year 1977, and they had a much different lineup back then. I can't keep track of it. But some of the members in the band around that time later formed the band Samson, which I'll talk about in a second. But anyways, those members, along with Steve Harris, wrote kind of a demo that later became the Ides of March. Well, the members that are currently in Samson left Iron Maiden, they formed Samson, and they wrote a song called Thunderburst, which appeared on the Head On album, which came out the previous year in 1980, and it was almost just about virtually identical to the Ides of March. Steve Harris had a writing credit, so did the other members of Samson, including future or current Iron Maiden lead vocalist Bruce Dickinson, of all people. Yeah, these two bands back then were very highly interconnected, but back then he went by the stage name Bruce, which I think is really, really stupid. But anyways, Thunderburst was released on the Samson album Head On, and it sounded very similar. It was almost virtually identical to the Ides of March, which came out the following year on the Killers album for Iron Maiden. I'm going to tell you right now, I prefer the Ides of March over Thunderburst. I like Samson. I really enjoy them. But I just gotta be honest, they are no match for Iron Maiden. I'm not even sure if Samson would crack my top 50. Iron Maiden absolutely beyond cracks my top 50. And I may be talking about them, I may be talking about that particular subject on a future video. I hope to, we'll see. But anyways, the Ides of March is really kind of an intro to the album. It's just a very brief instrumental to kind of get you in the mood. And it segues very well into Rothschild, which was written exclusively by Steve Harris, and boy does that have a great bass intro. It is a concert staple. It is played all the time in concert. And it's one of the very few songs from this album that is actually featured in the set list of these concerts that in Iron Maiden concerts currently today. It's a great song. It's only about 2 minutes and 54 seconds, but boy does it kick. And yeah, Paul Di'Anno is on lead vocals on the studio version. Of course, Bruce Dickinson sings on the live versions. But no matter what, it is great. And that bass intro is absolutely incredible. I did hear them play this once when I saw them in 2016 on the Book of Souls tour. They did play Rothschild. Then it goes into Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is apparently based on the story by Edgar Allan Poe of the same name. Starts out very, very slow, but then it kicks in and it builds up and it gets incredibly fast. I love Murders in the Rue Morgue. It has got a great rhythm to it. It's got a very fast pace to it. And I think it is absolutely incredible. I really wish they would play this one more often. I think the last time they played this was 2005, 2004. It was somewhere around then. They did a tour around that time where they only played songs from the first 4 albums. I know they played it then, but I can't think of the exact year. But yes, I love Murders in the Rue Morgue. Then we get Another Life, which is also really, really good. It's not quite as fast as Murders in the Rue Morgue, but it's got another very, very catchy rhythm to it, and I really, really enjoy it. It's got a very aggressive feel to it. And again, this is really more of punk metal, if that's even a genre. I may have come up with that by myself, I don't know. But in Another Life, great song, okay? Yeah, love it. Then we come to Genghis Khan, which is actually another instrumental. This is the only album that has 2 instrumentals on it. In fact, I think there's only 3 albums total that even have any instrumentals on it, but this is the only one with 2. Did we need another instrumental? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. All I know is that I like it. It's a little bit slower, but it's still, it's awesome. I really love Genghis Khan, okay? And if they ever play this in concert, you bet I will be banging my head to it. Then we come to the final track on side 1, Innocent Exile. It's got kind of maybe, I don't know if I got the right term for this, but it's got kind of a funky bass intro by Steve Harris. Maybe that's not the right word, I don't know. But anyways, it is another really great Iron Maiden song. And again, it may not have the emotional impact that future songs would have, but I think it is a definite good number by Iron Maiden. But if I had to pick a favorite from side 1, I'm probably going to go with Murders in the Rue Morgue. Maybe Rothschild, but I think I may have heard it a few too many times. That's the one that always ends up on greatest hits albums and live albums. So, may have heard a few too many times, but tonight I am going with Murders in the Rue Morgue as my favorite from side 1. But when we're done with side 1, what do? We flip it over. So let's flip it over and flip it around. Side 2 only has 4 songs, and it kicks off with the title track. The title track starts out kind of slow. Well, maybe not slow. It's got again, Steve Harris does the intro on this, and it's got a nice little bass rhythm going. I guess it's not slow, but the rest of the band hasn't really kicked in yet. It's just Steve Harris. But then the band starts coming in, and Paul goes, "Zah! Yeah!" I don't even know if I said that right. I probably did not. But after that intro, it kind of alternates between just the bass and the entire band. It starts kicking in, and this thing is also very fast. Great title track. Great song. Killers is probably the second most well-known track from this album, but I think it is really awesome and definitely worth a listen. But then we come to Prodigal Son, which is the longest song on here. It's 6 minutes and 11 seconds, and if you're familiar with Iron Maiden, that's actually kind of short in comparison, but it's a much different song than what came before it. All of the previous songs have been mostly very, very fast and have a very definite punk feel to it. Prodigal Son is much, much slower. It's a lot more melodic, a lot like Strange World from the previous song, but it's still got kind of a punch to it, which I really, really, really like. I know this probably is the softest song off the entire album, but I really, really love it. Mostly because of the rhythm and just how different it is from everything else that came before it. I love Prodigal Son. No, I don't know the lyrics. I've been listening to this forever and I just don't know the lyrics. I'm sorry, but this song is an absolute beast. It's an absolute killer, no pun intended. Actually, when I say absolute beast, no pun intended there either. But yeah, Prodigal Son is great. Then we have Purgatory, which is probably the most disposable song on here. It's very similar to all the other ones that I talked about previously. Very fast, definitely has that punk rock feel to it. And again, I still love it and everything, but if I'm gonna be completely and totally honest, it is definitely the most forgettable song on here, in my opinion. If you love it, great. But to me, it just doesn't hit the mark like the rest do, but still great. But then it concludes with Drifter, which was 4 minutes and 48 seconds. And this is another song that kind of alternates between very slow sections and very fast sections. But yeah, Drifter, love it, okay? It's got a nice little guitar intro in the beginning before it kind of mellows out a bit, but then it starts kicking in, and boy, it is absolutely awesome. But to be totally honest, if I had to pick a favorite from side 2, I am probably going to go with Prodigal Son. If you think Killers is better, or if you think Purgatory is better, or if you think Drifter is better, I completely and totally understand that. But tonight I'm going with Prodigal Son. But my favorite from the entire album, to be honest, it's probably Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is from the first side, and so there is that. Now, unfortunately, this is an album that gets very highly ignored by the band, it seems. They do not play a lot of these songs in concert, and I think that's kind of a shame, because I think a lot of them are definitely up to standards. I think a lot of them the fans would really, really enjoy. Yes, Wrathchild gets played every now and then, it seems, but the rest of the album really doesn't get its due credit, and I think that's kind of a shame. And kind of because of that, because I guess I listened to the greatest hits when I was a kid back in high school, and I noticed not a lot of the songs from this album were on the greatest hits albums. I actually ignored this one for quite a while. I mean, I bought, or I heard Number of the Beast, and Peace of Mind, and Power Slave, and the Debut, and I was listening to those all the time in 10th and 11th grade, and most of 12th grade also, but I never actually picked up Killers. And it's weird because I knew someone who had the album on CD. This was back in 2004. I could not just get on YouTube or Spotify and listen to it. We had CDs back then, and I just never really picked it up, but towards the end of my senior year, I did pick it up. I decided I was going to buy all the Iron Maiden albums, and I really realized how much great music I was missing out on. Out of those first 5 albums, is this one the weakest? Yeah, probably it is, but it is definitely not something you should ignore. If you are an Iron Maiden fan, this is a definite necessity, okay? If you are a heavy metal fan, I would say you should definitely check this out because there is some definite great music on here. Now, the vinyl editions do not include the song Twilight Zone. The CD editions do. The vinyl editions do not. So if you pick up the vinyl edition, you are going to be missing the song Twilight Zone, but when you put it on the CD edition, it is again definitely one of the weaker songs, but it's still definitely worth it. But that is going to conclude my review of Iron Maiden Killers, their second album, and yes, absolutely do recommend this one. So let me put this back in here, insert it back in here where it belongs, and that is going to be it for the night. Anyways, next time, I just talked about Killers. Next time, I would like to kind of focus my attention on a very specific type of killer. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.